Welcome! Today we're diving into the world of an instrument that might look adorable, but actually hides a pretty dark secret, the piccolo trumpet. If you've ever listened to Baroque music, those majestic 17th century concertos, you've definitely heard this brilliant little instrument. But please, don't let its modest size fool you. Playing this thing is a massive challenge that drives even seasoned musicians to pure despair. Let's find out exactly why.
Okay, let's dive right in. Here's our roadmap for today. 1. The myth of high notes. 2. The power of the fourth valve. 3. Switching pipes and mouthpieces. 4. Breathing to prevent dizziness. And 5. Comparing brands and models.
Section 1. The myth of high notes. Why it's no magic wand. So, the big question everyone asks, does a piccolo actually make high notes easier? Look, if you've ever wrestled in frustration trying to squeeze out those top notes on a standard B-flat trumpet, it sounds completely logical, right? This instrument is half the size, so those high notes must just fly out on their own. No more sweating. That's exactly why so many players pick up a piccolo for the first time.
But here comes the harsh reality. As experts will quickly tell you, the piccolo trumpet is absolutely not a magic wand for high notes. Quite the opposite. If you just pick one up thinking you'll effortlessly blast into the stratosphere, you're in for a rude awakening. You'll be hugely disappointed. It actually requires an unbelievable amount of skill, extreme precision, and literally years of practice to make it sound even halfway decent.
And this perfectly illustrates the physics behind the instrument. Because the piccolo is pitched literally a whole octave higher, it places those notes that are normally extremely difficult and unstable right into the middle of the trumpet's standard harmonic range. It essentially expands the space between the notes. So what does this mean for you? Well, once you actually hit the note, it's much easier to keep in tune. But, and this is a massive but, physically being able to play that note still requires the exact same strength and embouchure as on a regular trumpet.
Moving on to Section 2, the power, the fourth valve, more than an extra button.
The very first thing you notice when you look at a piccolo, besides how nice and compact it is that it has 4 valves. Why 4? Well, because the tubing is cut in half compared to a standard trumpet, you suddenly lose a huge chunk of your lower register. That fourth valve is basically your lifeline. It acts exactly like the valves on a heavy tuba. Press it down, and you instantly add a length of tubing equal to pressing your first and third valves combined. This lets you dive deep down, all the way to a low F or even a C sharp.
Without this fourth valve, you'd really be in trouble. You'd have to force out what we call pedal tones for those lowest sounds, and believe me, those sound just awful on a piccolo. Plus, this valve gives you the option for various alternate fingerings, which is absolute gold for your intonation. But the biggest win? It is an absolute lifesaver for Baroque music. A lot of classical pieces from the 1600s were written for natural horns in the key of D. To correctly transpose and play those pieces today, you simply need those extra low notes.
That brings us to Section 3, switching pipes and mouthpieces, the hardware puzzle.
A piccolo trumpet is basically a musical transformer. It can be played in multiple keys, depending on which lead pipe you slide into it. The two main flavors here are the B-flat pipe and the slightly longer A pipe. And listen, this isn't some cute gimmick, it's a bitter necessity. Imagine you're playing that incredibly tough Baroque piece in D major. If you swapped your A pipe, you can suddenly read and play the music as if it were in the much more comfortable key of F major. Crazy trills that would practically tie your fingers in knots on a standard trumpet suddenly become wonderfully smooth and playable. A total game changer.
And now for a huge warning about the hardware, the mouthpieces. You can't just jam your favorite mouthpiece into every piccolo. You're dealing with 2 totally different sizes, the wider trumpet shank and the much narrower cornet shank. And no, they are absolutely not interchangeable. If you stick a cornet mouthpiece into a trumpet pipe, it'll literally just fall right out. So if you're looking to buy or test an instrument, you need to be 100% sure which specific mouthpiece shank your instrument requires.
Section 4. Breathing. Prevent dizziness. Physical challenges.
Now here is where things often go wrong for beginners. Because this instrument is so bizarrely small, you have to deal with something we call back pressure, basically immense air resistance. If you take a giant deep breath, exactly like you normally would, and try to force all that air through this tiny little pipe, that air literally has nowhere to go. It essentially bounces right back into your throat and lungs. The result of that built-up pressure? You get incredibly dizzy and, yeah, in the worst-case scenario, you might just pass out right on stage. Not ideal.
So, the crucial point here is that you have to completely ignore your instincts. To survive the piccolo, follow these 4 steps. 1. Expect that wall of resistance. 2 and 3. absolutely do not take massive deep breaths. Instead, switch to smaller, shallow sips of air. And then step 4, the most important one. After you play a musical phrase, force yourself to actively exhale that leftover trapped air before you breathe in again. It feels completely unnatural, I know, but it is literally the only way to stay on your feet.
And finally, our last chapter, Section 5, comparing brands and models, making the right choice.
What's really fascinating about this slide is how the absolute top brands approach this instrumental puzzle completely differently. Take the legendary Schilke P54, for instance. That's pretty much the holy grail of piccolos. They keep it beautifully simple with just one lead pipe that you simply pull out a bit to switch from B flat to A. But compare that to the Yamaha. With them, you get the whole shebang, 4 separate lead pipes plus an extra built-in rotor valve on that third valve for even more lower range. Stomby sits somewhere right in the middle, with a strong focus on specific pipes for both cornet and trumpet mouthpieces. It's a hefty investment, as a piccolo costs just as much as a standard professional trumpet, so make sure you know exactly which approach fits you best.
Which brings us to the ultimate question. Are you ready to tame this gorgeous yet incredibly demanding instrument? At least now you know it's no magic wand for high notes. You know you literally have to reprogram your breathing, and you have to be super precise with your pipes and mouthpieces. And oh yeah, don't forget, when you're reading sheet music, you'll be constantly transposing in your head. It is an absolute marathon for both your endurance and your brain. But if you dare to take it on, you'll add a truly insane, sparkling classical sound to your repertoire. So the choice is yours. Are you up for the challenge?